Hi, welcome back for module 4. In this module, we're going to look at points of sail, just a bit of a recap, maybe a little bit more detail on points of sail. And really important one for this module is how the sails work. So let's dive into that. So here's a picture that you've seen before. We've got that no-go zone at the top. We've got reaching going across the wind. In particular, though, this type of reaching is called a beam reach. So back in the day when sails were square, there was a beam that goes across the boat. When the wind was on the end of the beam, or on the beam, we were on a beam reach. So that's sailing at about 90 degrees to the wind. Doesn't really matter where the sails are initially when we're learning to sail. This module will get into how we position the sails really well. But certainly on the first time out in the water, as long as they're not flapping, that's okay. Basically, we want the sails out as far as they'll go without flapping. And if they are flapping, we just pull them in a bit. Now, if we are sailing upwind, it's actually close hauled is another term for sailing upwind. And simply, we've hauled on that sheet and pulled the sail in as close as we can get. So if we've hauled on those ropes, the sheets, and we've pulled the sail as close to us as we can get, then we're close hauled and we'll be sailing upwind on the edge of that no-go zone. And sailing downwind, well, a broad reach is sailing downwind. So anywhere in this quadrant here, if we're not 90 degrees to the wind, we're more than that, then that would technically be a broad reach. Between a beam reach and close hauled, there's a close reach. So we're not close hauled when we're sailing at that angle, but we're less than 90 degrees to the wind, so we're sailing upwind a little bit. We call that close reach. If we're sailing more than 90 degrees to the wind, so the wind is still on the side of the boat a bit, but we're sailing a little bit downwind as well, then that's a broad reach. So close hauled, sailing upwind, beam reach, sailing 90 degrees to the wind, broad reach, still on the side with the wind on the side of the boat, but sailing downwind a little bit. And we need to adjust our sails in those points of sail, with all those points of sail. So if we're on a beam reach and we've got, say, more than 15 knots of wind, if we pull the sails in, the boat will want to turn up to a close hauled course because the sails will dictate where the boat goes. We can kind of steer the boat with the sails and the rudder at the same time. The boat won't like having the sails set for sailing upwind if we're sailing on a beam reach. It would just mean that we're leaning over a lot and probably going slow and sideways. So we need to adjust the sails. Now, if we're going to pull on the rope that controls the sail, we'd call that trim. So if we're trimming the sail, we're pulling the sail in. If we're easing the sail, well, we're letting that rope out and moving the sail away from us. So here we've got two boats, one sailing upwind, one sailing downwind. We can't sail in that no-go zone because we'll be stopped. So we have to sail on the outside of the no-go zone with our sails all the way in. We're close hauled. And then we're going to tack. And we can sail on the other side of that no-go zone and continue our way upwind, tacking as we go. Sailing downwind, initially, we're going to be sailing with a bit of an angle to the wind and we're going to jibe. So sailing upwind, tack, sailing upwind, tack, sailing downwind, we're going to jibe, wind's behind us, sailing downwind some more, then we're going to jibe and sail downwind some more. So we're going to zigzag our way up, we're going to zigzag our way down. On the way up, we're going to try and keep out of the no-go zone unless we're tacking. When we're sailing downwind, if we go straight downwind, which we can actually sail straight downwind, but we run the risk of having an uncontrolled jibe. That's a jibe that we're not ready for. Sailing with a bit of an angle to the wind will keep the boom in that position. And if we're a little bit wobbly with the steering, you know, we're off course a little bit, you know, we won't jibe and hurt anybody. As we get better with the steering, then yet on the second day of sailing, we'll probably be sailing straight downwind as well. Let's have a look at how the sails work. Now, when the wind is behind us, the wind just blows into our sail and just pushes the sail downwind. So we get pushed by the wind. There is, of course, an area in front of the sail where there is no wind because the sail is kind of blocking it, sort of a wind shadow in front of the sail. So that means that our head sail won't actually do much. It's behind the main sail and it's just going to flap and just kind of dangle there in that wind shadow. So when we're sailing dead downwind or running, we can actually pull the sail out on the other side of the boat, and that will increase the surface area that we present to the wind, and we'll go a little bit faster if we do that. And we call that wing on wing. When we're sailing downwind, the main sail would be just as happy on the opposite side of the boat as it is now, and vice versa, the head sail. So the sails can be either side of the boat will be really fine, and actually sailing straight downwind like that, they could switch over at any moment if we're not really careful. We will teach how to sail downwind without that happening, but certainly initially that's a bit of a danger. If we see that head sail blow through, then we're probably, you know, jibe is the next thing that happens. So how can Team New Zealand sail faster than the wind? If the wind is pushing the boat downwind, how can they sail faster than the wind? Seems impossible, right? They're sailing away from the wind. They're moving faster than the wind's blowing. How is that possible? Well, let's have a look at how we can do that. Here we've got a boat sailing upwind, and the air is flowing over the sail like that. And the sail works in the same way an aeroplane wing works. So when we're sailing upwind or on a reach, we're actually creating lift. And that's how Team New Zealand sails faster than the wind, because they're not being blown along. Their sail is creating lift and they're being pulled along rather than blown along. So if we have good airflow over the sail, we'll generate the lift. And that blue arrow is lift. So this arrow is the lift that generates from the sail. And this arrow is a little bit of drag. So all the sails create a bit of drag, but the lift they create is going to be what takes us forwards and upwind. A little bit to learn a bit more about that, about how the sail works. But if we don't have good airflow, we won't have much lift, and the boat will be sailing slowly. Not the past generation of America's Cup boats, but the one before that had a fixed wing, just like an aeroplane did. And that's just an aeroplane wing shape that's just easier to control. When you've got a soft sail, the control of that shape is a little bit more tricky. Let's have another look at points of sail then. So we've got close hauled, we've got a close reach, we've got a beam reach, and we've got a broad reach. And on all of those boats, the sails relative to the wind are at the same angle. So when we're sailing downwind, the angle is different. When we're sailing downwind, when we're on a very deep, broad reach, or we're running, yes, we're being pushed by the wind at that point. We've got our sails out so we can catch as much of that wind as possible. But when we're on a reach or we're sailing upwind, on all of these boats here, our sails are creating lift and the air has to flow over them for that lift to be generated. So that angle, the angle of attack, has to be the same, and it's actually the boat that's rotated underneath the sail, but traveling in those different wind directions. So here on a beam reach, you can see that the lift that's generated from the sail is actually in the same direction as we're going. And that's why being on a reach is the fastest point of sail. When we come and have a look at the boat that's sailing upwind, we can see that the lift is actually taking them sideways. So that's not very helpful. There is another device on the boat that will stop us. Here we can see that the sails are at the same angle to the wind and the lift is in the same direction. So relative to the wind, the sail is in the same position, the lift is in the same direction, but the boat is going in a slightly different direction. And the boat has a tendency to want to go sideways when we go upwind. There is a device we have on the boat that will stop us from doing that. And I believe that's on the next slide. Yeah, here we go. So we have some foils underneath the boat. So we have some wings effectively, and the keel will stop us from going sideways. The sail and the keel working together is the reason why we sail upwind. And without those things, we wouldn't be able to go upwind. Another important thing to note is that there are rudder at the back of the boat here that does us turning. That doesn't work if water is not flowing over it. So if you think about your car, when you come out of your house in the morning, you get in your car, before you turn the engine on, maybe you turn the steering wheel. But the car doesn't turn. You have to actually be moving forward. The wheels have to be going round for the car to turn. Same deal with the boat. If the boat is stationary in the water, the rudder won't do anything. It needs to have water flowing over it for it to turn. And one of the issues that we can come across is that in very light wind conditions, the boat might be traveling quite slowly. And if the boat happens to be going in the same direction as the tide, then we might lose steerage because there's no water flowing over the rudder. We might experience that when we're sailing. There's a few things we can do to counter that, and we'll cover those in the course too. Don't know if anyone's feeling a bit overloaded at the moment. Let's have a little bit more of a look at how that air flows over the sail. So like when we talked in module 1 about the weather and seeing what the wind is doing by observing the colors of the water and the waves, we can tell whether we've got our sails in the right position or not because we have bits of wool on the sails. So the bits of wool are called woolies or telltales. I think the official name is telltale. Woolies is an affectionate kind of slang name that we use to call them in New Zealand. And the telltales are on both sides of the sail. So we can see how the air is flowing over the outside of the sail and see how the air is flowing over the inside of the sail. And we want the air to be flowing over the outside and the inside. That's how we're going to create lift. So if the telltales are flying in a nice straight line, like they're shown here on this slide, if both sets of telltales are flying nice and straight, both sides of the sail, then we're going to be creating lift. The boat's going to be going fast and we're going to have control. We're going to have water flowing over the rudder so that we've got some steerage. So trimming the sail, adjusting where the sail is, or steering the boat is going to change how the air flows over the sail. Let's have a look into that. Here we can see that bits of wool are quite popular to have on our sails. So here is nearly at 7. And on the head sail, which is the sail we use to steer the boat, we have different positions on the sail where there are telltales. And that's so that we can see that the bottom of the sail is working, the middle of the sail is working, and the top of the sail is working. On the main sail, we have slightly simpler arrangement where we just have leech telltales. That's the back edge of the sail. And as long as the air is exhausting off the back of the sail, then that's all good. I would say that this sail setup was quite good. This other boat, this big boat here, that's a TP52. That's probably one of the biggest Grand Prix sailing boats, sailing series in the world. And you can see here that they're very keen on knowing how the air is flowing over the sail. They have lots of telltales on the head sail. They can see on the full width of the main sail how the air is travelling over that sail, and they seem very keen to know what the top of that main sail is. So that would suggest to me, if you're racing a TP52, then the top of the main sail is quite important. That's probably the difference between first and second as to how the air is sailing, going over that part of the sail. So one of the things that can happen is that the air flows over the outside of the sail, but it doesn't flow over the inside of the sail very well. And that telltale starts to flap and twirl around. Now, if we don't do anything about that, eventually the whole sail is going to be flapping and everything's going to be very wrong. What we need to do is make both telltales fly straight. And we can either trim the sail, pull the sail in so there's more air going over that inside bit of the sail, or turn slightly downwind with the tiller. So if we rotate the whole boat away from the wind, then there'll be more air on the inside of the sail. If we pull the sail closer towards us, same thing. Where that air splits either side, there'll be a bit more air on that side of the sail. That's something that we can play with when we go out sailing, and it's quite useful to be able to steer the boat by what the telltales are doing. So inside the telltale starts flapping around, we trim the sails or turn slightly downwind. Here we've got the outside telltale that's flapping. And again, it's flapping because of the same reason. There's not enough air on that side of the sail, too much air on the inside of the sail. Or if the sail is really badly trimmed, there's no air flowing over it at all, the telltales will just dangle down. So this is what that sail will look like from the top. The air is just hitting the sail and it's pushing on the sail. So when we're sailing downwind, the telltales won't work because the air is not flowing over it. But if we're trying to sail upwind or if we're on a reach, this is just going to make us heel over. The wind pushing on the sail will just make the boat tip. So we need to adjust that sail so the air is flowing over it properly. And this is the position where this sail should be. And if you can see that the wind is in the same direction, here it's not flowing over the sail, it can't, it's just hitting the sail. Here, the leading edge of the sail is able to split the wind and have some go one side and some of the wind go the other side, and the telltales are flying nice and straight. That's a really nicely trimmed sail. So we need to ease the sail. We need to let it out, or we need to turn into wind to make sure the air flows over the sail really well. Now, Rick, the American coach, likes to come up with different rhymes to help people to remember things. And one of the things he says is to trim to the tattling telltale. So here we've got the outside telltale, that's tattling, I guess, if you want to speak American. And if we ease the sail, we trim to the tattling telltale, that will start flying straight. Conversely, if the inside one is the one that's tattling, twirling around, if we pull the sail in, it will go straight. Similarly with steering the boat, if you point the tiller at the piece of wool that's twirling around, then the boat will change course, and when it goes straight, we can put the tiller straight. So that'll be something that we can play with when we're out in the water, and you probably get a much better idea of how that works. But simply the air flowing over the sail, the bits of wool are there to show us how the air is flowing over the sail, and we ideally want both bits of wool flying in a straight line. And if they are, we're creating lift. We've got power, we're sailing nicely, we've got steerage, we've got water going over the rudder, and everyone's having a good day. And we have a look at Team New Zealand. They also have lots of telltales on their sail. Really a lot there. This green line is there to emphasize the curvature in the sail. The bits of wool are there to show us how the air is flowing over the sail. So even with a budget of $200 million, there's no fancy computer system or gizmo that's better than a piece of wool that's stuck on our sail to show us how the air is flowing. Even Team New Zealand use pieces of wool so they can see how the air is going over that sail and see how efficiently they're sailing. Well done. That's the end of module 4. Have a go at the quiz. There's some gnarly questions in this quiz, but have a go at them. Hopefully it'll be some fun. I think there's some humor in it too. But when you're done, move on to module 5, and I'll see you there.